Grip socks are great, and now they're even better with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Better fit, moisture wicking, amazing comfort, and all the extra grip you need. Choose from 10 different colors for just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
It's been kind of a slow news month in the world of football boots, and like so many products we've seen over the last year or so, and even very recently, these got unveiled a long time ago, but are just now becoming readily available, at least in US markets, and that's a football boot from a brand that I'm personally a big fan of in Mizuno, this being part of their archive collection, where similar to Adidas, they've kind of jumped on the remake bandwagon, remaking, I'll be honest with you, a pair of football boots that weren't necessarily on my radar in the made in Japan Mizuno Morelia M8. These are available in limited quantities in this gorgeous blue, white, and red, retailing for $290, which is actually pretty good for a pair of limited edition Mizunos. Normally they're a lot more expensive, and it's a remake of a football boot that was made specifically for one of the Japanese international players for the 2002 World Cup, making this technically a 20-year-old football boot, but it sure doesn't feel like it. With that said, these are relatively simple football boots, and Mizuno have modernized certain elements of these football boots that I think make them more wearable by today's standards, and it's certainly not a style of football boot that appeals to the majority anymore. But if you are at all curious about the Mizuno brand, we're thinking to go full kangaroo leather, and you're just looking for something that feels arguably more comfortable than any other football boot you can buy, we're going to go over all the details of the M8 in today's video, including how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below, although do keep in mind they are super limited, so get them before they're gone. Now before we get into the technical side of the M8, I want to expose some misconceptions about how people judge a book by its cover when it comes to football boots, because I think if you looked at something like this, you'd automatically assume, wow, that looks like a Copa Mundial, it must weigh a ton, like wearing bricks on your feet, and surely if you compared it to the weight of a top-end modern-day speed boot in the X Speedflow 0.1 from Adidas, one of the most popular boots on the market right now, surely the weight difference between these two is gigantic. Well, both in a size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Speedflow 0.1. You can see that they weigh in at 7.3 ounces, the equivalent of 207 grams. Remember those numbers, change the scale back to ounces, throw these on the scale, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.6 ounces, the equivalent of 216 grams. So you were talking about a grand total of 9 grams as a weight difference, or 0.3 ounces between these two football boots in favor of the Speedflow. But if you're just after something that feels light on your feet, both of these football boots are super light. Speed boot weight, but old school comfort. It's something that Mizuno simply does better than anybody else. Now, as for the boots themselves, the M8 is relatively simple in that pretty much the entire upper is made from some of the finest kangaroo leather you are going to find on any pair of football boots. While $290 is very expensive, the quality is justified in that this is simply better than anything else that you can buy. However, it is also worth noting that as a concept, it's pretty similar to the current Morelia 2, this also being a made in Japan variation that retails for $280. So it is $10 less expensive and offers more or less the same experience, but for the extra 10 bucks, if you like the extended tongue, which is one of the differences compared to the regular Morelia, as well as just the exclusivity that comes along with something as limited as these are, I think the extra 10 bucks is totally justified. The stitching pattern through the forefoot and toe box area definitely being the most significant difference compared to the standard Morelia, where I would say that this feels a little bit less structured, and the overall shape does seem to be slightly wider and have a little bit more volume. So if you did have slightly wider feet, this would potentially be the better option out of the two, although both will be suitable for wider foot types. And in general, given how soft and high quality the leather is, as you break the boots in, they're going to stretch and form to your feet, and the subtle differences that you have in shape are kind of going to wash out once the boots have molded to your feet accordingly. The lacing system runs directly down the middle, and something that you won't find on a regular pair of Morelias are these new Zero Glide laces. At least that's what Mizuno is calling them. that also would not have been featured on the original. They're basically these rope laces that are a little bit thicker than the average football boot lace, that have these little kind of silicone, I don't even necessarily want to call them grips, but there's a texturing to it that's not there for the sake of control and grip on the ball, because I don't think that's very noticeable whatsoever, but it's there to actually prevent the laces from loosening as you're playing in the football boots. Again, really questionable as to whether or not this has any legitimate impact on performance, but it is something Mizuno seems to be implementing as of late, so it's definitely worth noting. The tongue is also different from a regular Morelia in that it is made from leather, or at least the top part is made from leather, and then the back part is in this kind of old school foam. So this is something that would be similar to a pair of Copa Mundials, and something that was relatively common on a pair of football boots back in 2002. So you could technically cut this off if you really wanted to. I personally think it looks quite cool. And a nice little detail that they've added is if you do choose to fold it over, it does leave that exposed foam, and they printed the Mizuno logo on the underside, which I think looks quite cool, although keeping this down will take a little bit of work in terms of keeping some clothespins to hold it down when you're not wearing the boots, so you get that permanent flop. Another subtle difference between the standard Morelia and the limited M8 is the cut at the very back, where of course they're both low-cut football boots and they come up just as high on the back, but you can see the shape is different on the M8, where I wouldn't necessarily say that this feels better or worse. I don't even think it's particularly noticeable, but what is a noticeable difference is the heel liner, where this has this really soft suede material that grips your socks super nicely. And I would say there is 2 to 3 times more padding back here than what you're gonna find on the regular Morelia, which I would personally argue feels a little bit more comfortable. Internally, the insole fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. Nothing special about this at all. Again, I would assume that this would not be the same on the original. This is more just taken from the standard Morelia, in that it's this soft lining material on the surface, and it's made from a single layer of black foam. Relatively standard, but also pretty premium. Which brings us to the base of the boot, where again, Mizuno have definitely modernized this aspect of the M8 from 2002, in that it's the exact same sole plate and stud pattern from the current Morelia 2, which does utilize newer plastics, which is why this is able to be as light as it is. I can't imagine that the original M8 would have been as light simply because of the plastic used on the sole plate. That's one of the more underrated advancements, not just in football boot technology, but footwear technology in general. Plastics have just gotten so much lighter. Nonetheless, this sole plate feels very natural, as you would expect and as you would want from an upper that is entirely made out of this super soft kangaroo leather material. Typical of Mizuno, it's an old school construction in that you get 3 rivets at the tip of the toe and 3 rivets at the heel, meaning that from a durability standpoint, despite the high price tag, these are built to last. Again, nobody makes football boots like the Made in Japan division from Mizuno. You truly do get what you pay for. And as far as the stud pattern is concerned, this is their FG layout, which you can see does feature all conical studs. They're not as long as most FG stud patterns these days, and of course the shape of the studs are relatively wide in profile, so they don't necessarily dig in and bite quite as hard, but they provide really good traction and certainly more freedom to twist and pivot if that's something that you're into. Obviously not the aggressive traction that I think some people look for from football boots these days, but definitely enough traction for most people and something that you could definitely get used to. I'm sure you've seen one of those videos on social media describing the feeling of relief when taking off your football boots after a match and throwing on some slides. Well, I'm here to tell you that you can have the comfort of a pair of slides in a pair of football boots in something like the Morelia M8, and truthfully, even the regular Made in Japan Morelia 2. However, these in particular, I think do trump the regular Morelia from a comfort perspective, in that I really do enjoy the extra padding in the heel liner. But other than that, I don't think there's a significant difference between them. Again, a little bit more width and a little bit more volume through the toe box area. With this stitching pattern, I think more than anything, it's just a little bit less structured, but once broken in, there just wouldn't be much of a difference between them. The long tongues, probably not something that everybody's into these days. I think it looks really cool. As far as folding them down is concerned, you're gonna have to work them in to get them to stay down. You can see I can fold them a little bit out of the box, but it just kind of stays at this weird, almost like 45-degree angle. I just wouldn't want to wear them like that. So I'd probably leave them up or cut them off if I were going to be playing in these as my game boots, if you will. But again, from a comfort perspective, the softness of this kangaroo leather, the shape is perfect. I think, again, a stigma that a lot of these old school football boots get stuck with is that they're going to have the fit and feel of something like a pair of Copa Mundials, which legitimately feel like old school football boots. This has modern shaping despite being a remake of a football boot from 20 years ago. They fit as well as just about anything, just are way more comfortable. It's really the best way to describe it. From a width perspective, these are going to be suitable for anybody, especially if you do have wider feet. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, obviously the Morelia M8 is not to everyone's taste these days. However, if you're after a pair of football boots with the best build quality, the best kangaroo leather on the market, and arguably the most comfortable feel out there, you absolutely cannot go wrong. And unlike so many super expensive football boots these days, certainly the limited edition ones, I think these ones are totally justified. And for me, the Morelia M8 made in Japan is the most comfortable football boot that I've had on my feet in 2022.